Hello, Cardac Radio. We are talking live streaming on your Facebook page. Welcome another Sunday night. It is wonderful to be here on Sunday, January 12th, 2020. We are also now live streaming on Cardac Radio. I'd like to remind everyone, tell your friends about Cardac Radio. It is an app you can put on your Android or iPhone. Type in Kardec, Kardec, radio, and you can upload that app for free. You can get 24 hours a day on your phone, your cell phone, of Spiritist programs. You can also go to Kardec Radio webpage, look that up, and you can look at all the older past programs by many different wonderful people talking on Kardec Radio. So tell your friends about it. It looks like to me there's more people every month listening to us on Kardec Radio, and they are listening to us throughout the whole world. So thank you very much for all listeners. So again, as we've done all last year and the year before that, we are talking on Sunday nights, and what a wonderful thing to have everybody here with us again on the Kardec Radio Facebook page. Please join, tell your friends, like the page, and come and hear myself on Sundays and other people throughout the week. You can look on the Kardec Radio page. It will give you the schedules. And there's always something interesting going on about Spiritism. There's always something new to learn. But today we are talking about the Gospel according to Spiritism. And the section we're going to talk about is chapter 5, Blessed Are the Afflicted. And of course, this is all written by Allan Kardec. I believe this was his third book. His first book, of course, was the most important book, and that was the Spirits book, which he wrote. He codified from many different, when he had a series of 1,019 questions to mediums throughout parts of Europe. He did not codify them in his book unless the responses from the spirits were similar or exactly the same. So to me, to many other people, you read the Spirits book and it was like, okay, this is what I've been looking for. This is substance. Has substance to it. This has meat. This explains why things happen. And then you should read the Spirits book first. And then if you've read the Bible, the New and Old Testament, or any other religious text, then you should read the book I'm talking about today, is a Gospel according to Spiritism, because I don't know if you're like me, my understanding of the Bible with all the parables and allegories, I like, what do they mean, right? So one last thing before I start in Blessed Are the Afflicted is, if you have Netflix, please tell your friends or yourself, go see the movie Kardec. It's a great movie. It is about his life and how he was reluctant at first. He didn't believe. He thought that talking to the other side, the spirits was a bunch of mumble jumble. And then what he heard so amazed him, things that, only who could know, right? That it changed his mind. And he said, okay, I'm going to do this in a very scientific manner. I'm going to pose these questions. I'm going to find out what's going on. And so very interesting person. Okay, let's get into it. I've made you wait long enough for Blessed Are the Afflicted, which is chapter 5 in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So the chapter starts out with two different quotes. One is Matthew chapter 5, verses 5, 6, and 10. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then he also quoted Luke chapter 6, verse 20 and 21. And he lifted up his eyes on the disciples and said, Blessed be ye poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. And then lastly, he had Luke chapter 6, verse 24 and 25. But woe unto you who are rich, for ye have received your consolation. Woe unto you that are full, for ye shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh, for ye shall mourn and weep. So what does Allan Kardec tell us about this? Because you read this and go, well, it's terrible to be rich and you reach your consolation. And there's a lot in the Spirit's book even about this. But let's see what Allan Kardec says about this. This is what he wrote. The compensation promised by Jesus to the afflicted of this earth can only be effected in a future life. Without the certainty of this future, these maxims would be a contradiction. Still more, they would be a decoy. Even with this certainty, it is difficult to understand the convenience of suffering in order to be happy. It is said that to acquire greater merit, but then we ask, why do some suffer more than others? Why are some born in misery and others in opulence without having done anything to justify the situation? Why is it that some never manage to achieve anything, while others, everything seems to smile? Yet, what is even less understandable is why benefits and misfortunes are so divided unequally between vice and virtue. Why do we find virtuous people suffering side by side with the wicked who prosper? Faith in the future can console and instill patience, but it does not explain these irregularities which appear to contradict God's justice. And of course, that's what I always ask in a lot of my programs. I would say, okay, how can we explain that bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? And this is in summary what Allan Kardec wrote. Why are these things? Why are virtuous people have problems? What is that God's justice? And he says it appears to contradict it. I'll go on what he says. However, once God's existence has been admitted, one cannot conceive him as being less than infinitely perfect. He is naturally all powerful, all just, and all kindness, without which he would not be God. If he is supremely good, and just then he cannot act capriciously, nor yet with partiality. The vicissitudes of life derive from a cause, and as God is just, so then that cause must also be just. This is what each one of us must convince ourselves of. Through the teachings of Jesus, God started man on the path to find that cause. And now that man is sufficiently mature as to be able to understand, he has revealed the cause by means of Spiritism. That is to say, through the words of spirits. So, what Allan Kardec is telling us is that, yes, Spiritism is telling us what the cause is. And in essence, the cause is past lives, what our acts have been in past lives. Now, let's see what he says next, because this is very interesting. He says that the vicissitudes of life are of two kinds, or if you prefer, stem from two different sources, which are important to distinguish. Some have their cause in present day life, while others arise outside of this present life. On going back to the origins of earthly misfortunes, it must be recognized that there are many natural consequences of character and the behavior of those who suffer them. How many fail through their own fault? How many are victims of their own thoughtlessness, pride, or ambition? How many disastrous marriages are due to the fact that they were built on calculated interest or vanity in which the heart took no part? He goes on a lot of these things, as in how many illnesses and diseases stem from intemperance and excesses of all kinds, which again, we see all these things today. There's no difference from the 1850s to what we have in the 2020s. It's all there. We've all done these things. So why? So what are the past causes of afflictions? Well, those are the deeds we have done in the past. Now, as Allan Kardec said, there's past causes and then there's present day. So we do reap what we sown in our present decisions, right? We have to sleep in the bed we created. We got to lie in the bed we made. But also some things, not everything, I like to caution people this, not everything that happens to you, and these are mostly that are trials that are not full of emotional trauma, but they are just things to kind of enlarge you, to give you more experience. And because we go through this life not just to pay for our past wrongs, but to also learn in new circumstances. That is why, if you're going to be a pure spirit and you're going to be a leader of other spirits, or a leader of deciding how a human or human-like race is going to, alter themselves over time, you must, have many experiences. So you may be born and gone into the military. You may go into medicine. You may go into corporate leadership. These things may happen just to broaden your horizon. So not everything is because you're not a musician right now because of some past deed. You're a musician probably because you've liked that and you've asked for that, or you maybe that they want to round out your experiences by being a musician. So these are things that also they're still planned, but these things that round out. So in essence, Allan Kardec is telling us these are our past deeds, and then we have to go through them. In fact, there's another wonderful thing that I just saw the other day, and this is from Revelation chapter 3, verse 21. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame and am set down with my Father in his throne. So that was Jesus in Revelation chapter 3, verse 21. So again, this tells us what reincarnation is about, because Jesus just said in that small little sentence, that small quote, that he had to go through what we are going through today. I had to overcome. I'll help you overcome, right? Now he's sitting next to God. He said he is going through exactly what we've gone through. We have gone through afflictions. He has gone through afflictions. When I read in the different passages about when people see Jesus, high spirits talk to the Reverend G. Val Owen, and you'll see a lot of this in my book Heaven and Below when I talk about Jesus Christ. And they see Jesus, and he's this blend of male, female, and he's regal, and yet you can see the suffering and understanding in him. And that only comes from who knows how many eons, millions, maybe billions of years of experience, hard knocks, probably at the beginning, things that we went through too. And they talk about it, when he shows himself, they said he shows himself almost differently every time they see him. Because he can manifest himself as ever he wants. And of course, he manifests himself to us here, humans on earth, and spirits around the earth and the different levels of heaven as a human. But of course, he probably was not born in our exact human form. He was probably another close to form, what they usually say, although some can be quite different, I've heard. And a different, as he went up, he's probably been in many, many different forms. So that's what's so amazing about Christ, is that he loves us, even though. And then, of course, he came here in human form, so he understands our weakness probably better than anyone else too. So those are just things about Jesus. So, and it's still amazing to me in the Bible when I read these little things, and I hadn't thought of them before, because I read through, and as you read, you don't really concentrate on things. But when I reread that one from Revelation, I thought, oh, okay, that just shows that reincarnation. There's so much in the Bible about reincarnation that people choose to misinterpret, which I can understand. They didn't want to put that in the Bible, but there it is. So the other thing I like to say before I go on to what Allan Kardec said is that Spiritists, when they see someone afflicted, usually what we do and what I do is I kind of say a little prayer. In fact, there's one, and I forgot what book it was, and they said, when you see someone in a really tough situation, very severely disabled, say a little prayer in your mind for that person, give them a little love. And that's what I try to do, because they are really paying for something terrible that probably either they did to themselves or something like that from a past life. So that's what I try to do. Now, let's carry on with Allan Kardec and what he said, what the past causes of afflictions are. That's what he says. Although there are misfortunes in this life caused by man himself, there are also others which seem to be completely strange to him and which touch him like fate. For example, the loss of a loved one or the breadwinner of a family, accidents which no amount of foresight could have prevented, reverses in fortune with which precautions and judicial counseling could not avoid, natural disasters, infirmities from birth, especially those which make work or the earning of a livelihood impossible, such as deformities, insanity, etc. Those who are born with restricting conditions like those mentioned have done nothing in their present life to deserve such a sad fate, which they could not avoid and are totally impotent to change, which leaves them at the mercy of public commiseration. Why then are there these unhappy beings, when beside them, under the same roof, in the same family, are others who have been blessed in every way? In short, what can be said of children who die at a tender age and who, during their short life, knew only suffering? These are problems which as yet no philosophy has been able to find a solution for, anomalies which no religion has been able to justify, and which appear to be a contradiction of goodness, justice, and God's divine providence. If the hypothesis of the soul being created at the same time as the body, and that of destiny being irrevocably determined after but a few instants upon earth were to be verified, this indeed would be the case. So what he's saying is, if you believe, as the Catholic Church says, that you only have one life, then how is it in God's divine justice and God's divine love that someone would be born that way when if they've done nothing wrong? Now, I know I've heard of, some people say, well, God does this so they can have problems and test them. That still doesn't sound fair. Test them why? Why do they need to be tested and someone else doesn't? No, there's a very good reason. And Allan Kardec says that. He says every effect has a cause. And I've read this over and over in almost any spiritualist letter by Ivan Piera, Jiva Owen, Devaldo Franco, Chico Xavier, of course, Leon Denis. Every effect has a cause. And really that is what we all must know in this life, is we must understand everything we do is recorded, analyzed, and it's used as part and parcel of planning our next life. So Allan Kardec goes on, as he says, therefore, as an effect is always preceded by a cause, and if that cause is not to be found in the present life, then it follows it must come from before this life, that is to say, from a preceding life. Now, let me give you an example of that, of myself. About 3 or 4 months ago, I was talking to a medium, and he asked me, he goes, have you ever had problems with your feet? And I said, no. He goes, oh, interesting. He goes, well, because in a very past life, this is far back, he says, you chopped off people's feet so they couldn't escape. Like I must have had slaves and I chopped off their feet, which did happen. And I've read about this when the Persians in the Persian Empire captured a Roman army. And so they could not escape. They chopped off their feet. So they had to work at whatever thing they were working at, some small table or bench. And so they couldn't get away. And in fact, the Roman chronicler said it was really sad when the Romans in a later war got all those people released and how they tried to hobble back to their homes. So when I told him, I said, no, I haven't any problems. But I didn't think at that time that when I was born, I had a club foot. Now, of course, I don't remember that because now when that happens, they put the little braces on the feet of a baby, right? And therefore your feet are locked into place, and your bone when you're when you're an infant is pretty malleable. And so I never even had any conscious memory of any problems whatsoever. But I am probably pretty sure in a previous life I must have paid for this with a severe disability. And knowing what Spiritism tells us, that we review our whole life when we're in the womb, and our spirituality, our perispirit, will affect our evolution as that embryo. And of course, higher spirits can affect more and more. They, whatever the maximum of how they can rearrange whatever DNA they had to do, they have to use from both parents. They can do a lot, but that may have been a leftover from my own, my own mind, really regretting that horrible thing that I did, and therefore I had a club foot when I was born. Of course, the spirit world didn't let that affect me much because I never had any memory of it. So that's why I thought it may just be part of my own spirit and my own guilty feelings of wanting still to pay for something. I probably have already paid for it, but of course, as spirits always tell us, and you hear this in NDEs, near-death experiences, is that we are our worst judge, right? We make the hardest trials for ourselves. In fact, I talk a lot about this to people when they say, "Oh, I can't believe this has affected me, and this is horrible." And I go, "Well, for some reason, knowing," and when I usually get to know these people better, I think, well, they're really good people. And I said, for some reason, you must have thought that you really wanted that, because if you were a spirit, any of the levels of heaven, you will work with your spirit mentors on your trials and tribulation that you have in your current life. Now, if you were born, if you were a spirit in the lower zone or the dark abyss, which is, kind of a purgatory, those people are just sent to earth and their destiny is pre-planned for them without their input. But if you're a good, decent person, most probably you were part of the planning process for your body. So be happy with what you have. Be happy with your brothers and sisters and your parents and your economic situation and the house you have and the car you have and the way your nose looks on your face and how much hair or not hair you have, because you probably decided it. You can pick your own body, your color, your eyes. You can do all that. Of course, you have more freedom to do more of what you want to look like as you go higher and higher, right? As with anything, the more you learn, the more you prove yourself to be responsible, the more responsibility that you have. Okay, so let's carry on with the gospel according to Spiritism. Blessed are the afflicted. This is what Allan Kardec says, and this is important. So I just said that if there's any problem that you don't know why it would happen, it must come from a previous life. So this is what he says after that sentence. On the other hand, God being unable to punish goodness that has been done or badness that has not been done, it follows that if we are being punished, then wrong must have been committed. If that wrong is not of the present life, then it must come from a past existence. That is an alternative that no one can avoid, and where logic determines on which side God's justice lies. Man is not always punished or completely punished in the present life, but he cannot escape the consequences of his faults indefinitely. The prospering of badness or evil is but temporary, for if he does not atone today, then he will atone tomorrow. Likewise, he who suffers is atoning for his past. So there's a good book, Sex and Destiny. It's one of the Andre Louis series of books. And they are talking about people who, in this book, in some of the chapters, they're talking about people who have done, sexual type crimes or bad things or obsession with sex. And then they go through and they help these people. And then they actually had statistics of how many actually got better, got worse, And it almost corresponds. And I don't have the statistics in front of me. I should look them up before I did this talk, but it wasn't very good. Right? It was like around 30 or 40%. Someone can correct me if anyone sees, put comments on when I load this up to YouTube or BitChute, put comments on there. But it wasn't spectacular, let me say. And some people went backwards, right? Some people still, did bad things, illegal things, and self-harming things. But it's also funny because you even read in the books the number of people that are just given missions and tasks, right? And these are people from, levels of heaven. And they say even then, a vast majority of people fail. So it just shows you how hard it is for us, that I'm sure that so many of us that when we're in the spirit world say, oh, I can do that. I can still be good. I can still be rational. I can still be loving. I can follow the golden rule. And we come here to earth and we are living in this culture, and we get, and as I've heard spirits say, when you're a human, the allure of luxury and desire and is so much, it's so much more present, and so much more, that you want it so much more than the allure and the rewards of goodness. And that is so true. If you're good, to us, if you're good, you're denying yourself pleasure. Now, once you start studying and really understanding Spiritism, goodness has its own pleasure. But that's not how it starts out. That's not how we as a culture look at goodness. Goodness denotes dull, boring, right? Routine, all these things. It's not because I'm not saying I'm good, but I'm saying that when to do good and to help is very satisfying in that. In fact, there's been studies, and anything that the most satisfying things people do and what they remember the most is when they help others. Of course, that is living within your own mind. That's not supplying pleasure to your senses and to your skin and to your brain. But still, even through all that, humans like helping other people. It does give them pleasure. But that's not comes to your mind when you think about goodness at first. That's why it's so important to study Spiritism, because as the more you can study it and you understand the rewards of goodness, not that not that you should be bribed, but the rewards, your own self-reward, your own ability to help others even more, not only in this life, but really in the next life, all the spirits around, then it becomes something that is very important. But that is why that is why we fail so many times. And I'm sure I've been told I failed over and over and over again. I've always gone after money and power. It's just it's sad. And I was told that by spirits in the mediums meeting. Now I don't. I think hopefully I learned that lesson, but I do worry. What happens, within the quote we had at the beginning, where, if you're rich, and the spirits say that's the hardest trial, is being born rich, because then you can do anything you want with impunity. And then your attitude is like, well, I'm smarter than everybody else because I'm rich, right? Isn't that our culture today? You're automatically a genius or famous if you're rich. Even if you're not, even if you're an idiot, it doesn't make any difference. If you have money, that means you're successful. Of course, spirits tell us that the people we ignore the most are really the most successful on earth. Of course, we have to look at it through our own culture. So one thing that scares me, I really don't want to be born rich, because will I just leave everything I just did in a minute and go, okay, well, let's just have fun in this life? I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. That worries me. I would say no, please don't let me be born rich. I'm not ready for that yet. So these are things, right? I know I'm far from where I should be. So this is what Alan, Kardec has said, right? This is so he's saying all of these things happen in the past. And, if someone loses a child or someone, which is, and of course, the spirits have also told us that sometimes spirits will volunteer to be a child to parents, and then they will live a very short life in order to teach the parents, to give some suffering for them to teach, the love and justice and spirituality, because they say, right, pain is the great teacher. Those happen. They've been in books by Chico Xavier when they talk about that. Allan Kardec goes on to say, we might find ourselves deprived of the necessary means of survival. If we had been a bad son or daughter, we may suffer from the behavior of our children. In fact, I know a person who told me about that when he says he suffered from behavior of his children. He told me that he was a very famous dancer and that he ignored his two children amongst all else. He came back in a life where his two children were husband and wife. And guess what? He was totally ignored. His parents didn't really care about him. He got, there's a cause for every effect. He's learned that. So these are things you learn. It's amazing when you look at the intricate tapestries of our predetermined lives, how everything fits together for everybody on this planet. We're all actors in this great play, all teaching us things. And this is why it's so important about blessed are the afflicted. And this is a key. And this sounds strange, but you have to learn what's behind it. When something bad happens to somebody, and if you understand Spiritism, you say, oh, well, that guy or woman is kind of lucky because he's paid for that past wrong. He's got that over with. It's not going to happen next life. Especially if he or she's learned that lesson from whatever terrible thing happened to them. They're actually somewhat lucky. The afflicted are somewhat lucky because they've come here, they're afflicted. Next life, it's over if they've learned anything. The person you really feel sorry for is the person who may be the cause of that affliction, the person who stole all their money from them, the person who, burned down their house, right, or crashed into their car, because that person is going to have to pay for that wrong. That person has got a future ahead of him or her that's going to have some lessons. That's why your whole outlook on life, your whole outlook on people and what they do to you and what you do to them and how they think is modified when you understand and study Spiritism. Because everything has a cause. And it's always interesting. I tell you, one of the fun things is you look back and you see people in the news and you see people in power and you think about, okay, what have they done? And first of one of the fun things is think, who could they have been in a past life? Of course, you see these spiritist videos, which they all say, this person in past life. I don't necessarily believe that, but it is fun. But then you really think about, okay, what were they in a past life to be given their position now? And what are they doing that is going to have consequences into the next life? And that is a very interesting thing to pontificate about as you see people, your friends, your colleagues at work. You think about these things. Let me take a quick drink here. So, anyway, let's go back to Allan Kardec. He's much better than I am. That's what he says. And it kind of goes on with what I was just talking about, amazingly enough. If we elevate ourselves by means of thought in such a way as to see a succession of existences, we will perceive that to each one is given what is deserved after taking into consideration that which was gained in the spiritual world. Man must never forget that he finds himself in an inferior world to which he is confined due exclusively to his imperfections. Each time he suffers a vicissitude, he must remember that if he belonged to a more advanced world, these things would not happen, and that it depends on himself alone to see that he never returns to this world by working harder to improve himself. So that is a key message given by Allan Kardec. If you, and I can't, first of all, I can't tell you how many people say, I never want to come back. You know, I believe in reincarnation, but I don't want to come back here. I refuse to come back to the earth. This is a horrible place. Well, Allan Kardec just told you the answer. If you don't want to come back, be as good as you can. And boy, is that hard, being as good as you can. That is a daily, minute by minute task. I mean, how many of us keeps our calm, our temper, and our bad thoughts? And, you know I fail every day. I know I'll be back here. I've got a lot more to improve. It's but a journey starts with a single step. So you've got to start somewhere. So this is again why studying Spiritism and trying to follow this rule. Okay, so I have a good question. That is whether all human beings were created at the same time. And the answer is, of course, according to Spiritism, no. And that is why there are so many different levels. Okay, there's two things to do with this answer. First, there are people who have superior quality, superior intelligence, and people who are born in have lesser intelligence, lesser qualities. And a lot of times that is because of the spiritual maturity of one soul versus another. There are leaders, there are managers, and there's workers. That is a maturity. Now, let's talk about whether all spirits, human beings, were created at the same time. First of all, human beings, you have to look at human beings as just a physical representation. Those are created all the time throughout history as we evolved into a Cro-Magnon type man who had intelligence. But I think the question was, we're all spirits who are going to go into a human being were created at the same time. Again, that is no. Spiritism tells us that spirits go through a level that we start off as a pretty simple logic. They'd say a primitive personality. And then we go through, we could be a plant, an animal, or whatever. We go through stages in which either we are picked somehow for some reason, I have no idea, and I never read this, to be given free will. Now, let's say a plant has no free will. An animal may have a little bit of free will, right? A human, their own, and I'm talking about the difference between intelligence and instinct. So I should really say kind of self-directed intelligence. Everybody's seen cats and dogs who seem to have that. But in humans, it's a law, right? You are given your free will. So no. So a spirit will start out with their own, and that spirit could, like Jesus, right? Jesus was in a human-like body, in a human-like planet somewhere, billions or who knows how long ago. And no, he wasn't created at the same time. Socrates, who was a high spirit and one of the ministers of Jesus, must have been through who knows how many reincarnations, probably not that far behind from how many lives Jesus had. He's such a high spirit. So that is what Spiritism says. And the spirits are created all the time. There's all planets that, just like us, we're a campus on Earth, and the Earth's job, the job of Jesus Christ, is to get us through this school and get us to the next planet, right? Or the next level, the planet of regeneration. Now, as also someone commented that, yes, we are all equal as spirits. Now, on Earth, when they say all men are created equal, of course, we know that is not true literally. That should be true for justice, right? We all should be created equal under the eyes of the law. We all should have equal rights. Of course, we know we're not equal here in physical form. I could never be a surgeon. I could never be an astrophysicist. I could never be a professional basketball player, right? I can't do any of those things. I was not created equal to them. But as a spirit, we are really equal. And that is why someday we can all become a pure spirit. It is up to us to decide to educate ourselves into whatever thing we want to, and then also to make sure we have a broad education. In fact, there was a great, it's in my book, Heaven and Below, talking about education in the spirit world. One of the spirits was talking to Reverend Chief Owen about spirits who have gone through and have educated themselves in one level after another, and they're in a pretty high level. But there was this one kind of city, kind of a college area on level 10. And what he said with these people on level 10 is that they should be in level 11 or 12 in some areas, and they're just barely a level 10 or maybe a level 9 or 8 in other areas. And in order to rise, you have to have all the areas past a certain point. You have to have a breadth of knowledge and a breadth of talent and a breadth of your love and desire. So these people were giving each other classes, and the ones who were advanced in some things were given classes in that, and yet they were taking classes in things that they were somewhat lacking. And they organized themselves because they were very high spirits anyway, and they knew what they were lacking. It may be, enough humility. It may be some sort of scientific understanding of some concept, anything. So that's why, yes, as a spirit, we are all equal. We can all be musical geniuses if that's what we wanted to specialize for a while and then do something else. So yes, there's many things we can do. So I hope that answered the question. So let me carry on with what Allan Kardec, because we're almost done with the meat of this chapter. So what he was talking about is we should give thanks to God, who in his goodness helps man to repay his debts and does not irrevocably condemn the first fault. It is not to be thought, however, that all suffering in this world denotes the existence of a determined shortcoming. Many times it is simply an ordeal requested by the spirit, which will help it towards purification and active progress. I talked about that in the beginning. So atonement is always a test, but a test is not always an atonement. Tests and atonements, though, are always a sign of relative inferiority, as that which is perfect needs no testing. Nevertheless, it is possible that a spirit, having reached a certain degree of elevation and being desirous of further progress, may request a mission or task to perform by means of which she or he will be more or less compensated, depending on whether or not they are victorious and according to the difficulty of the requested test. These are those people who have naturally good instincts, whose souls are elevated, and who possess inborn sentiments. They apparently bring nothing from their past existences, and who, despite great torments, suffer with true Christian resignation, asking only that God help them support their trials without complaining. On the other hand, we may consider as atonement those afflictions which provoke complaint and which cause revolt against God. And beyond doubt, the suffering which does not provoke complaint can also be considered as atonement, but this indicates it was voluntarily sought rather than imposed. This constitutes a test of our strength of resolution, which in itself is a sign of progress. And as I tell people all the time, and I get people telling me, I've gone backwards. I've gotten upset over this. I've gotten mad at that person when they did that, and I know I shouldn't have. And It's just amazing. We get these little tests all the time. And they're actually, though, it's a good thing. You know, if you play tennis, for instance, against someone who's completely inferior, do you become a better tennis player? No. You got to practice all the time. And it's good to practice against someone better than you are, because then you really learn. Well, the spirit world knows this, and that's why they give us these tests all the time. And sometimes they give us these difficult people who point out our imperfections. And of course, we get mad. And the reason we get mad is they're right, but still they shouldn't have done that, right? And, well, I've been through that a lot. So it's just, and now I just, okay, yeah. And I think about it, and I still get emotionally sometimes defensive, which I shouldn't, but that's still a weakness of mine. But now I think it through and think, how can I be better? Right? When someone leaves me, I mean, I get comments all the time on my YouTube channels, on emails, whatever, telling me how wrong I am. And if someone comes up and tells me how wrong I am, gives me a good reason, I'll answer them back. Or if they just say I'm wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about, then I just let it go. But a lot of times they've given me good things to think about. And I found out that the way I've argued wasn't complete enough, right? I didn't get after the problem with all the different areas and avenues I could have. So it's really good if you can get that way. And of course, we all have to aspire toward that. It really helps us grow as a person. So Allan Kardec does say that spirits cannot aspire to complete happiness till they have all become pure. Any kind of stain prohibits entrance into the blissful worlds. Of course, that's where we'd like to go. It is like the passengers on a plague ship who find themselves prohibited from entering port until they have undergone a cleansing. The imperfections of spirits are slowly overcome by means of various corporeal lives. The tribulations of life, when well supported, help them towards progress. They erase faults and find purification by means of atonement, which is the remedy which cleanses the sores and heals the sick. The more grave the illness, the more energetic must be the remedy. Therefore, those who suffer greatly must realize that they have the most to atone for and should rejoice in the proximity of the cure. It will depend on each one to take advantage from the suffering by being resigned and not spoiling things with impatience, seeing that, if that be the case, they will then have to begin all over again. This is why I tell people, learn the lesson that was given to you, because if you don't learn the lesson, just like in a good school, you'll have to take the class over again, and you really don't want to do that. I can't tell you how many times I tell people that if you're in this family unit with this person you really hate, please reconcile yourself, because the spirit world will keep you in that same family somehow, some sort of relationship over and over again until both of you kind of, you don't have to love each other, but you got to just respect and like each other, be cordial. So if you have difficult relatives, do what you can. You may fail, right? It may be impossible. They just hate you, but don't give them cause. Give them cause to think about it. They may not think about why they should stop hating you, but and maybe they'll think about it when they're in the spirit world. So do what you can to reconcile anything like that. So I want to thank everyone. This has been a wonderful time. Thank you for people asking questions. If you would like to learn more about what we're talking about, again, read the Spirits book, first of all. That is a great book. And you can get that on PDF. You can also look it up on the Amazon too. But you can get the Spirits book on PDF. You can get the Gospel According to Spiritism on PDF. You can get all of Allan Kardec's books on PDF. And if you want to learn more about heaven, how we are educated in heaven, how people see Jesus, how he governs us, like a governor, like a CEO, all those things adjectives I could describe how he actually operates in the heavenly world, the bands around the earth. And a lot of this was given to us by different books. I bring in different books. A lot of this is from the Beyond the Veil books by Reverend G. Allen, but I also use quotes from Allan Kardec, Chico Xavier, Leon Denis, Yvonne Pereira. I try to bring in and consolidate information from spiritist mediums given to by spirits, and I try to consolidate it all. My book 2, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, is about spirits. What are the attributes of spirits? What's the power of spirits? How do we attain power? What can we do? What can we not do? And of course, my third book is how we are guided by spirits, and I talk about how the human race is guided, how we are individually guided, and what the whole Earth will become, how we will become a planet of regeneration. So I hope that will help you. If you're interested, please pick up Allan Kardec's book or Chico Xavier's or my own. Anything you read is good, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel or my BitChute channel. Leave comments, ring the bell, tell your friends. The more we can get the word out about Spiritism, I strongly believe the more that we not only individually can ascend and rise, but collectively as the Earth, we can become a planet of regeneration where people won't be, really worried about coming back to another life on this horrible planet, because this won't be. This will be the paradise that it should be. And we collectively can make that. And the best way to do that is try to live according to the doctrine of Spiritism and educate your friends. I want to say God bless to everybody and good night.